Welcome back, everybody. In the last video, we got all the rust repaired behind the passenger seat. So today, we finally get to drop in our classic fab floor pan. All right, boys, it's finally time. The floor pan's going in. I got it all cleaned up in here. I reshaped this, filled that in so that it fits up real nice against the floor pan. I had to trim a little bit off of the sheet metal here, just because that's the transmission cross member. Now, I don't believe I'm going to be using that because looking at the length of the CD09 that's going in, it's way longer than where that transmission mount is. So I probably will not use that at all, but I want to leave that in there because right now it's connecting, if you can see, it's connecting both sides right now of the tunnel. You know, I left the transmission cross member in when I took it apart just to keep everything more stable. So the back is all shaped, everything's all cleaned up, all the edges. I got weld through primer on everything, and we're ready to go. Except for one thing. I gotta make holes in all of the lips where the lap joints are gonna be to do plug welds. So I've already done one edge. I did this side where it goes against the rocker, and I'll show you how I do that. You could sit here and drill all of these holes along here, but it'd take quite a while. So I bought this thing, which is a sheet metal punch. It's basically a hole punch for sheet metal, and it's way easier than drilling. All you gotta do, wherever you want a hole, slide it in, and it makes a nice hole for you to do a plug weld with. Go and punch all these holes, and then we can get to welding in. Easy as that. So we get all our holes all the way along. I'm going to flip it over and put some weld through primer on all of our lap joints here where it meets up to the car, so that I know we're 100% protected, or is not 100% necessarily, but as good as we can be protected from rust on those lap joints, because that's a big place for rust to form, is in between the two layers of sheet metal. So we'll get to that, and then it's time to put it in the car. We finally have a floor pan in the car. Look at that. The fit is basically perfect. Lines right up with my seam here. Lines right up with my seam up there. Nice line all the way down here. So now the plan is I just gotta work my way around, pinch the, this new floor pan right tight to the car. I don't want a gap underneath. One thing that I realized that might help you guys if anybody else is doing something like this is these Clecos work nice. They're great for being able to take the panels out, in and out as you want to, and keep them lined up every time you put them back in. But they don't like a lot of movement of the panel. If I start banging on this and I only had a couple in here, they'd pop out every once in a while. Or if I had a part like here, I gotta really push that down to get it to fit, and it doesn't always like to hold because it's just spring pressure holding this together. So what I found is some self-tapping screws work very well. You know, I just run this down through here, suck it right down, do my welds, and I can pull the screw back out. Those self-tapping screws work perfect. They, as you can see, I'm all nice and tight. You know, I had various little gaps where it didn't fit 100% perfect, but you throw a self-tapper down through there, and it is tight, just perfect. So that is my advice. Use self-tapping screws, then just do your tack or your plug welds. Then you can pull those self-tapping screws back out and fill your holes with some weld. So now I'm just going around and welding all the plug welds in. With these, I found you really want to make sure that you burn it in nice and hot. That way you ensure that you get penetration on the bottom layer. It's easy for the weld to just stick to the top layer and not attach to the bottom layer, especially when you have weld-through primer on the bottom. Alright, next step in getting this floor pan in is we got to trim along here to make this fit exactly how we want. As you can see, the transmission tunnel slopes back here and my floor pan doesn't. They made the sides higher, so you got room to trim. I'm going to trim this here where I mark this line. That'll get us about where we want to be. I will say this Milwaukee die grinder is excellent. Works great. You don't have to have an air hose hooked up, but it does eat through batteries real quick. So if you pick one up, just make sure you got extra batteries. Now we need to clean up all the paint on the new floor pan and everything that's still on the old floor pan so that we can have a nice surface to weld to. Now I'm throwing in a couple self-tapping screws where the transmission cross member is, just to help hold that side of the floor pan nice and tight. And now it's time to start cutting off the old excess sheet metal where it's overlapping and start tacking it together. Alright, some more learning. On this seam here, where we need to trim everything and get everything butted up nice and tight so that we keep our same shape of the transmission tunnel, I was struggling getting it to fit nice back here. That is because I was going to do what I've heard referred to as the cut and butt method. So what I was going to do is cut, I don't know, 4 or 6 inches or so right here, tack it, cut another 4 to 6 inches, tack it, all the way down. But because this OEM transmission tunnel stuck down to about here, all the way back, and you got a curve there, I guess, it wouldn't let me get it out there. I had a decent like half-inch gap that I couldn't get rid of, even pushing on it hard. So what I decided to do was just trim the whole thing. Seems to have worked perfectly. Once again, I used some self-tapping screws down here to suck this down. This back corner is sucked down right tight against the floor underneath it, you know, the part that we repaired last time, so that it fits perfect. And that's got our seam right here all lined up, and we can just work our way down this way. I've used a couple of these. I know there's people that don't like these, but I'm finding they work quite well in situations like this, although it's hard to get your piece around the backside by yourself, but it is doable. So I got a couple here holding it in place. So what I'm going to do now is just start here, tack, make sure we're nice and smooth, tack. One thing I've found that you really want to make sure you do to help improve the finish of your weld is to get those panels as smooth and level as you can. You know, here I'm using the hammer to tap it in place. Use my finger or thumb to rub from panel to panel to really feel the difference in height. The closer you get them to perfectly level, the better quality finish you'll get, because you won't have a drastic difference in panel height, and you'll lessen your chance to grind through one of the panels when you go to grind it smooth. So really try and do as good of a job as you can at lining it up at this stage. My gap is a little tight right here, so I'm just gonna trim that with my knife just to make it so I got a nice gap. And really take your time here. The more time you spend getting this right, the less time you're gonna have to spend grinding and perfecting the look at the end. Once again, I'm using self-tapping screws to really suck that panel down against the other one so that we don't have any sort of spacing in between, and we line up our panels on top as good as we can. Once again here, I still had to cut off the old sheet metal where the panels are overlapping, so I just used the new panel once again to trace a nice line with my die grinder and cutoff wheel and trimmed it off, and that way we got a perfect gap in between the two panels. And here we have our panels tacked together. We still have some fitting to do as we go along and finish weld. Now we'll weld across the whole thing. We still want to use air after every weld just to keep everything as cool as possible, try to help prevent warpage. But I cut out all the air in between all my other welds just for effect. I thought it looked cool on the video, but just rest assured you do want to use air after every tack. And here's what we're left with at the end when it's all fully welded. Now that we got that all welded up, got to grind it down. I'm not going to bore you guys with that because you've seen it a bunch of times already, but I'll catch up with you after I'm done getting that all ground down. All right, we got our floor pan all in. It's fully welded all along the whole thing. I seam welded every edge too, in addition to the plug welds, all the way along here. You can see we got it all seam welded. I ground it all down so it looks nice, and now it's time to put our seat mounts in. So I've already been getting them to fit perfect. They're not 100% easy drop-in fit. The back one actually is. The front one, I had to do some work to. I had to grind some of the lips. I had to beat some of the edges in so it would fit up nice, and it took a while to get it lined up exactly where I wanted it, but I used, since I still have the other floor in, I used measurements off of that to get this one to fit perfect. So as you can see, I've got all the paint ground down where we're going to be welding. I'm going to throw some weld through primer on that, and Owen is working on the seat mounts up here. So he used a hole punch to put a bunch of holes in for the plug weld. Now he's cleaning up all the paint off the edges so that we don't have any issues when we go to weld. All right, here we go. Got this seat mount all ready to go. I don't know what I was thinking. I primed with the weld through primer on the top side. I didn't need to, clearly, because that side's going to be exposed and it's going to get paint later. So I quickly cleaned that back off just to make it a little bit easier to weld when we're ready. But the bottom side is all primed, so we don't have to worry about that rusting. The next piece, you know, the rear mount, is ready to go. Now we'll just drop this in here. Actually, it goes this way. And I have holes all ready to go here, up there, and one back here for self-tappers to get it lined back up exactly where I had it, so I don't have to remeasure everything. So we're gonna run those in. I'll probably run some more in too to get it, you know, the areas where it might need to be sucked down a little bit, and then it's time to weld. Fits pretty nicely. You know, we got some gaps here. I'll suck that down still. I think we're gonna start welding before I get too much further. Up here, I had to beat those flanges down just because it doesn't fit perfect around this curve here. That's not a big deal. It's gonna weld in just fine. Over here, for whatever reason, it doesn't fit up 100% to the edge. I have measured, and I've got these seat mounting holes exactly where they need to be. I've spaced them out from, you know, from the edge here to match the other side. And what I believe is the right spot, you know, forward and back on the car. I used measurements again from the other side to get it lined up, and I have it perfectly square. I stuck a square right here. I'll show you. So I used that to line it up, make sure it was nice and square, which it is. So these holes where the seats actually mount are in the same spot as the originals. So for whatever reason, there's a gap here, but I'll just hammer those down when I get over to this side and weld them in. It'll be just fine. Well, we got that one all stuck down all the way around with some self-tappers. It's ready for welds. I'm gonna get the back one set in place, and basically what I did is, once again, I used the other side, measured from the front one to the back one, because you really need to make sure that your spacing from the front seat mount to the rear seat mount is dead on. What I did, now that this one we know is 100% in the right spot, it's square, not going to go anywhere. What I did is I did some measurements on the other side, like I said. This bolt, center of this outside bolt here, or the bolt hole, is 10 millimeter from the inside of the rocker. So I just measured that, it's right on. And then the easiest thing that I found to use was to measure from the inside edge underneath here. You know, I'm measuring off the backside edge of right here to the center of my bolt hole, and on both sides that's at 14.5 inches. So we've got that dead on, and we know where we're going to go. So I'm just gonna throw some self-tappers all the way around, make sure it doesn't move, get it sucked down tight, and we'll get to welding. By the way, this edge here, you know, this edge right here, I actually had to fold it back past where the original bend was to get this over here so that I could get that 10 mil spacing from the inside of the rocker to here. I'm guessing that these seat mounts aren't fitting 100% perfect because I believe these were prototype. These seat rails weren't on Classic Fab's website yet. They sent these to me when I asked to see if they had them ready, because I wanted to buy everything all at once. Luckily they had them ready, just didn't have them on the website yet. So I'm guessing, looking at them, that they might be prototypes and not the full release. Either that or everything's just a little bit off because they're the first version of them. But they're close enough that they fit and can be easily made to work. Just gonna get your gaps tightened down and do some measurements. You know, I had to grind off here a little bit because I couldn't get it far enough back because of this lip. I had to cut off around this nut right here. I'm not sure even why that's there, to be honest. My OEM original floor pans weren't in good enough shape that I even remember them being there. I can't think of what they would be for underneath, but maybe could be for the hangers for like the brake lines and stuff. I'm not sure. I'll probably just take them off at some point. If I don't need them, just weld them up. not a big deal. Anyways, so yeah, this here, I just had to bend over further than it was. The original crease was here. I creased it right here just to get this far enough over. Now I'm just going to tap it back in place. I think we're ready to go. It's all nice and tight all the way around. As I work my way around, I'm gonna make sure I get everything super tight. And it doesn't matter if there's a little bit of gap in some places. If you look on the other side, oh, it's easy to see from here. But there's gaps on these ones, even from the factory. There's a gap right here. There's some other random gaps. So the big thing is, as long as it's mounted solid, and the top of both is in the right spot, then we're good to go. One thing you got to make sure when you're doing plug welds is that you don't just weld to the top piece. It's very easy to not get any penetration on the bottom one. So I like to turn it up and really burn it in. Maybe it's unnecessary, but I have had them pull off. And again, I'm going to be stitch welding this, so we're going to get some extra strength anyway, but I like to get my plug welds nice and burnt in. And I like to make sure we're nice and tight. You don't want a gap there. So what I've been doing is either just using my body hammer, or if you can't get down there good, using my bronze punch just to really sink it down. And there's what it looks like after the first pass. So we're all nice and tight. I'm going to pull all my self-tappers out, weld those holes up. Then we'll get the back all plug welded also. Then I can do some stitch welding, and then I'll grind them down, and we'll be all done with the floor pan. So in stitch welding here, your goal is not to just do a full seam weld around the whole thing. It's unnecessary. What I find works best for me is to do one bead that's inch and a half or so long, skip a couple inches, do another bead. I also found that turning the heat up and the wire speed a little bit higher than you would when you're just doing your butt welds on your sheet metal allows you to weld a little bit faster and actually reduces the chance of burning through. We finally got the floor pan in and 100% done. Check it out. Seat rails all in, welded right where they need to be. Got it looking good. And now we're 100% done with this side. This is a huge step in the 280Z project. Now it actually looks like we've accomplished something. We got some good momentum going now, so I believe next time we're gonna start on the passenger side. We'll have to get that side all cut out just like we did on this side and see how much besides the floor pan that we need to do. You know, we got a surprise on this side when we had to repair that whole firewall. I don't think we're gonna run into that over there. It seems a lot more solid. I know I do have some repair to do behind the seat just like we did on this side, but now we've got experience doing this, so we just gotta copy and do the same thing on the other side. That experience helps a lot. So the other side should go much more efficiently, but very happy with where we are. I'm hoping to get this done within a couple weeks. As soon as that's done, it's going back up on the rotisserie to do the frame rails, and then we'll start getting the other smaller spots that we don't need it sitting on the floor to do, and we can get it up where it's easy to work. Hopefully you've been enjoying the videos. I'd like to know what everybody's thinking about the voiceovers. Tried it last video, tried it a little bit this video. It is easier when I'm in the garage not having to stop and talk and explain what I'm doing, but it's a lot more effort in the editing side. So I don't mind doing it. You know, if everybody likes it, I'll keep doing it. Personally, for myself, I could go either way. I like videos where the person working on the car is explaining what they're doing and why they're doing it, which I'm trying to do while we're doing this. But anyways, let me know what you think of the progress we've made so far on the car. You know, this started as a non-running, but completely assembled 280Z. Gotten it 100% stripped down. Don't forget, we still got this over here that we're waiting to put in. So if anybody doesn't know, I am putting a 2JZ in it. I got my CD09 trans sitting down there too. So that's the stuff that I really enjoy doing. I'm not particularly a fan of doing this rust repair, but I don't want to build this car and still have it all rusty. So we're gonna get the shell 100% ready to go before we put it on the road, which involves paint, which I've never done before. Anyways, please like, subscribe, comment, you know, whatever you can do, it all helps. And if you got any tips, leave them in the comments. Thanks for watching. I hope I see you in the next video.